for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we sit or anything, being that we do have our public safety team here tonight, I think it's entirely appropriate that we hold a moment of silence for all the public safety officers across the United States who lost their lives in the line of duty in the past year. Thank you very much. All right, this evening we have been preempted, I am told, so no live broadcast. We are tape delayed. Be that as it may, we have a full agenda. We have the fire department first. We have hydrant water. We have emergency management, emergency communications, police, animal control, and then we have health and welfare. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns before we start on tonight's agenda? Mr. Mayor, anything we need to tell the boards about at this point?
Nothing from finance, sir.
Okay, thank you. Tonight, in looking at these budgets, we'll notice that there's going to be a lot of explanation required on the salary and compensation lines. There's a lot of moving parts, and as in past years, we have the impact of contract settlements coming in that exaggerate the year-over-year differential and variance from one line item to the next. I'm going to ask that we be walked through that for both departments. And we're going to start with the fire department, which is page 209 in our budget books, page 209. The numbers themselves start on page 210 and 211. Welcome, Chief.
Good evening. How are you tonight?
Good, and yourself?
Very good. And thank you for recognizing the sacrifice that firefighters and police officers make in the country and the performance of their duties.
You're quite deserved and welcome. So, do you have anything you want to say before we dive into the budget itself?
Only that first to recognize the work that Assistant Chief Skylar Sherwood and Deputy Chief Dunn have the work that they've put in to manage the budget this year and produce the budget for next year. It has been a challenge for us starting fresh, but I think that having a fresh set of eyes and evaluating every expenditure is a helpful way to develop a budget, and we question everything as a result. So I think that it's been a very good process on our part, and the budget that we've produced is very responsible in my opinion.
Thank you, Chief. Anything else? Anything you want to highlight before we go to questions?
Yeah, there is an issue with the budget as was presented, and the deputy is passing out a document that reflects the revised budget in fiscal year 16 to provide a better comparison against our proposed budget in fiscal year 17. Because of the roll-up of expenditures for the contract settlement, the document that you have is not reflective of the real increase, or the modest increase, actually, year over year. And I hope that that document will provide better understanding of the department budget. And a couple of things that I would point out in the document that's been delivered. The salary line, the year-over-year increase from the revised budget to the proposed is 1.83%, despite a 2.49% wage increase. The aggregate of all of the overtime accounts total 2.23%. Again, as compared to an increase of 2.49 in the budget, and producing at the end of it all an increase of 1.69% from the revised 16 to the requested selectmen's recommended budget in 17.
Okay, are we to presume that the differences here are the transfers from contingency into the various compensation accounts related to the union settlement?
Yeah, on the fire, there's, the payroll was, the regular payroll and the part-time payroll were transferred per individual. The overtime earnings were all transferred into the vacation relief, otherwise it would required, they have 6 overtime accounts. We'd identified 100 people, 6 accounts within 120 different potential entries. And that was obviously the document that the Board of Finance passed with the, with the adjustment to the contingency account, the transfer from the contingency account to the operating account. So when you look at the document that Chief Dunn just passed out, the regular part-time payrolls are accurate with respect to the dollars per individual and in total. The overtime numbers, if you look at the first overtime numbers, vacation relief, it's 1979. 100% of the overtime got placed in that line item. So when you look at the other numbers below that, the 422,000, the 70,000, the 301, those were actually the budget numbers, the actual budget numbers, the original budget numbers for the budget.
Okay, so,
Then you have the actual in 15 and...
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the explanation. Very simply, the revised budget numbers that the chief just presented, did finance sign off on these? Are these the right numbers?
Correct.
Are there questions from board members related to the salaries and compensation? Mr. DeWitt?
Oh, this is way in there. So, okay, I understand the new numbers, and everything appears to have been salary related, except for IT software. How do we go up $5,000 in IT software in the existing budget? It went from 9,000 to 14,000. Because now you're going back down to 9,000 this year. I'm curious what that was.
I'm sorry, your question was why did we go from 14 to 9?
Mr. Mayor's statement was, after asked by the chairman, were all the changes that we're seeing in black here from transfer from contingency
That's not
based on
correct.
salary?
I said that the ones in salary and overtime were. None of the others
My
are.
apologies. So, other than the salaries in Social Security, there's only one other change, and that's IT software. So that went up $5,000. That's your existing budget.
Correct.
And it didn't come out of another line item, so I don't know how your budget went up $5,000.
But we were finding we were taking money out of another line item to fund that. We've been going over just for everything that we needed, during the year. So we just wanted to make that reflect what we actually needed in that line.
Except none of your line items went down $5,000.
No, they didn't, because what we were having to do, we were taking money out of special departmental supplies, and we weren't able to buy things that we needed to buy. So we just exercised restraint just to try to, keep that line balanced.
So, Mr. Mayor, where will that money come from? That
Well,
will just overrun at the end of the
A
year?
couple of comments on that. We attempt to communicate with all the departments that any overages on a line item should be recorded in the accurate and correct line item.
Agree.
It should not be fit onto a different line item.
Agree.
And then what happens at the end of the year is, we aggregate the departments, and we aggregate total, then we come to the board for the transfers. So this would have been one of the transfers that was...
So we made this transfer already to IT software?
On one of the schedules, A, B, C, D, or E, which is in September.
Oh, okay.
Last September, right.
We made it for this year or for last year?
It's this year's operating budget
Right.
that's changing.
What you might have done is carry over something from 16 into the 16 year.
Well, then it wouldn't be in the budget.
Well, then it wouldn't be in the budget.
It would be in the revised budget.
No. The revised budget, Mr. DeWitt's absolutely right. If this is the revised budget,
Oh, wait, this is the 16 budget.
There is a transfer in the Munis report of $5,000.
but was that approved?
That $5,000, what we did is that's in contingency because that has to do with a software program that was never finished. So that's just sitting in contingency.
I guess what I'm trying to understand here is,
Me too.
yeah, because your explanation.
It appears as though it's done.
Mr. DeWitt, thank you very much, because your explanation, Mr. Mayor, on kind of, we transferred funds from contingency to the individual line items when the contract got settled.
Correct.
So this, in terms of compensation, this should represent 100% the quote-unquote revised budget as a result of official transfers that took place.
Correct.
Now,
The 16, yeah.
But then
unless there were other official transfers that took place,
there were no other transfers that took place for this fiscal year's budget other than, that I'm aware of, that I recall, other than $10,000 that we transferred out of IT contingency into IT to do the phone thing.
Right.
That's the
Not
only one,
into fire.
that's the only one I remember, so I would have to research this.
There is, your Munis report does say that, Linda.
Right. The genesis of the revised column on your schedule is from our Munis report. And Munis picks up open POs from a prior year that are carried over to 16. That has nothing to do with the transfer between contingency and salary, but maybe an open PO awaiting the completion of a purchase. That's why it's picked up on your Munis report, and that's why it's reflected here.
But I thought everything under transfers and adjustments on our Munis report
was
had
prior
to be
year.
made, a change that is usually done by schedule.
It's done
We
by,
do at the end of
it's
the
done by
fiscal year.
schedule at the end of the, but you have you have carryovers. That's right, I forgot about that.
That's part of the
They carry-
schedules, right? The schedule.
Right, that would have been part of the schedule that was approved in September related to fiscal year 15. So it'd be
You
carry-
underran-
so it'd be
you underran that
carryover.
$5,000,
So
they
that
just
goes into
transferred
the
it forward.
budgets, yes, so this clarifies. So there was a 5,000 PO open that got carried over in September for fiscal year 15, and then that shows up, I forgot about that aspect, shows up in the revised budget, right.
thank you. Any other questions on that one, Mr. DeWitt?
No, thank you.
Can we go on to other topics on this budget? Any other questions for other topics on the fire budget? Mr. Brown?
On the overtime, you hear me okay?
Oh.
I guess we're sharing mics. Just on overtime vacation relief and overtime, just on holiday pay, that's decreasing year over year?
Yes, the firefighters have an option in their contract to either take that, the money, there's an incentive there, they can either take that in the check or they could take it in time, and it seems to be there's a tendency to take it in time, which comes under vacation as opposed to holiday.
Okay,
So we reflected that by asking for less money in that line.
okay. And question, when was this current contract signed?
In August, I believe? August of 2015.
And when is the next one due?
June 30th, it expires June 30, 2017.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Timiak?
Good evening. I had a couple questions. One, I'm excited that you guys had your first crack at the budget. I'm looking over it and I see a lot of increases in line items. We have, and I'm not talking about salary and items related to salary or the contract. And it brings me back to what you said about fresh eyes on the budget. It seems like most of these lines ended up increasing, some of them by sizable amounts. Is that what sort of happened here? Is that the right perception I have? I mean, did you make any reductions in other accounts besides motor vehicle, fuel, and lube, which obviously the cost of fuel's gone down this year, which I'm not seeing or picking up on the sheet?
So there are a number of lines that have a zero increase. There are some lines like that have motor vehicle and lube down 16%, and others that do have an increase. And what we have done is, as we evaluated, and this was a conversation we had in our preliminary review with the first selectman and the finance director, there had been in the practice, a practice in the past of transferring funds or billing incorrect accounts in order to balance the books. So so all of the accounts ended up corrupted for all intents and purposes that didn't accurately reflect the expenditures in that. So we spent considerable time evaluating all of the expenses, researching what has been paid out of which account, and building a budget based on that reality as opposed to what the numbers were, because they were not reflective of actual expenses.
So, with that statement, in reality, that we haven't been paying the proper amount for our fire department in the last couple of years, it's really been corrupt?
No, the numbers all have balanced, but if we ran it in the past, if the account ran out, and instead of over budgeting or overspending and then making legitimate transfers at the end of the year, an item would be billed to an incorrect account, and as a result, not reflecting the actual expense for in a particular line.
So with that's, I mean, we're looking at,
So now we're balanced.
so now we're right.
Balance the accounts to make sure that they are accurate, they reflect the needs of the department, and that we will be able to operate within this budget, and that if we do overexpend, we will do it in consultation with the finance department, so that we are not creating inconsistencies in our accounting practices.
Okay, so, and then I looked at the capital outlay.
Yep.
It looks like the first selectman removed some money from that.
Yes.
What's the increase from last year going for this year? I mean, it's, what do I got here? 15.
So what came out of that budget was one SUV, and that was just over $38,000.
What's the makeup of the rest of that 58,000? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, we can review that for you.
All right.
The first item is 30-minute SCBA cylinders, the air bottles that we use on our backs, and we do each year, we replace, we have a program where we constantly replace a certain amount each year so that we keep our inventory, and this is part of what you'll find in past budgets. 10-year hose and water replacement, you'll also find that. Hose has a shelf life, and it has to do annual pressure tests. Old hose won't do that, so we constantly keep a bit of our 48,000 feet of hose. We buy a certain amount each year. Some newer things that you'll see in there, we found that, for example, our high-pressure airlifting bags, these are the rescue bags we use on our aerial ladders, on our rescue trucks to lift heavy vehicles and move trains away from platforms to rescue people or whatever we have to do. They were both extremely old and beyond their service life. So we said we have to, we started looking at things anew and said that, we have to start getting a program for large items like that and putting them so that they're not surprises. But we had to start somewhere because they were beyond their life, and these are dangerous tools to have pneumatic airbags, lifting bags beyond their service life. So we added that in. The next thing is our automatic external defibrillators. The AEDs are, all of them are past the replacement period. So this is another thing that we want to get in the pipeline so that we're not, coming down the line looking at 10, the need for 10 of them. So we're getting 3 of them this year, and we're hopefully going to try for 3 next year. The last item, and we deleted a purchase of an SUV, which we believed that we needed, but that was removed from the budget. The chief will tell you about the last item, PPE, which stands for Personal Protective Equipment, body armor for rescue task force members.
So the last item, in partnership with the police department, we are evaluating the role and capabilities of the fire department at hostile events, violent events that both the police department and fire department respond to. We have developed a response protocol that provides support from the fire department while the police are making entry to neutralize a situation, that we stand at the ready with EMS to make entry to provide care for those that may have been injured and are potentially at risk of losing their life from blood loss from a violent attack. In doing, we have, and certainly the chief of the police has been part of this discussion. We're following the best practice and the national standard to provide some degree of protection for the firefighters that are making entry. Those circumstances are not secure. Those areas that we would enter are not completely secure, but they have been cleared. Safe for entry with protection from the police department and personal protection being worn by the firefighters and the EMS. And that would allow us to outfit each firefighter, so every riding position for our 7 frontline vehicles would have a vest with a plate that would give them ballistic protection so they can make entry and provide that level of care.
Is the, one of the things that people know that I've been an advocate for town-sponsored ambulance service for a while. I think that we do a lot of the stuff, and the fire department has been doing a fantastic job. We're paying for a lot of the equipment which goes in the ambulances, but we're not actually getting the revenue from that side. Is the AMR contract, is that in here under professional fees and services? Where is that located?
There is no contract with AMR.
Okay. All right.
The AMR is providing service. The contract expired, I believe, in 2012 and was not renewed. They have the license to provide service as the R2 in Fairfield, and the fire department serves as the R1 to support their operations.
Is that something we can go out to bid on?
Because they are not paying a fee, no ambulance provider is going to pay a fee to provide that service. I think that we can negotiate and certainly look at the role that the fire department plays, and is there an opportunity for fee collection for the fire department to offset our expenditures, and that's something that we're working on. We're working to buy consumables or through AMR so that we can get a better price for the consumables that we use at these calls. But this is a long-term project for the town and the department to evaluate just what is the role of the fire department. Is there an opportunity for us to offset our costs through fee collection, provide a higher level of care, and just where is that threshold where there is actual revenue coming in that doesn't exceed our costs.
Okay. How much revenue do you think Fairfield's not collecting on this? Like, guess, comparing to other towns,
I wouldn't be able to venture a guess.
Okay.
There are significant dollars that are being collected through insurance from by AMR, but I wouldn't venture a guess on what.
All right. So, and I guess I would make this for the general audience. Other towns, Stratford, Trumbull, Westport, Ansonia, Shelton, they all have this as a revenue-producing item in their budget. And Fairfield has not had this for a while, and we have a company, AMR, here without a contract, taking our residents who have been most likely treated initially by our fire department, professionally serviced by them, and then we go off to a private company, and now our hands of our residents are in a private company to take us to the hospital, to administer medical care, and then they go ahead and they bill our insurance company and our insurance cards. And most of the people in Fairfield have insurance at this point, so the collection rate, and I've crunched the numbers, the collection rate would be extremely high. And I know that it's a revenue producer in the other towns I mentioned. Here, we're actually just giving the money to AMR, a private company, after our department has stabilized the patients And legitimately, you know, they do administer medical attention as they take them to the hospital, but it's the hospital ride which they're billing for. So they're essentially coming here making profit off of our residents after our fire department, which we're paying for, and fully funding for all this medical equipment to be in the trucks, and we're getting no benefit from that. I think that's a practice which has to change in town, and I hope that's something you're sincere about looking into.
Yeah, we have talked, Selectman and I have talked, we have had initial conversations with the finance department. There is a significant investment that the town would have to make in training and equipment if we were to take over the R2 responsibility for care and transport to the hospital. That is going to take quite a bit of work on all of our parts to ensure that this is truly a revenue-producing venture as opposed to another expense and liability for the town. And I do think it is absolutely worth our efforts to do that. And we will do that evaluation.
A simple step in between those two, I think, would be to submit an RFP and solicit other vendors to come in here, because there are other ambulance services, and there is profit, so there has to be, the same thing we do with the concession stands, there has to be an equilibrium between what makes sense for these private companies to pull in revenue versus just giving it away for free.
They are licensed by the state of Connecticut, Department of Health, to provide the patient care in Fairfield. That is, and there is certain rights that they have to that because they've made the investment to equip themselves and staff the company to respond in Fairfield. Other communities that have decided that it would be financially beneficial for the town to take over that level of service have ended up in protracted legal battles with the legal R2 license holder. So it's not something, so there is a financial component, but there's also a legal component to these steps. And we want to make sure that we're first on legal ground to assert the town's right, or if we have that right, to take over the level of care. And then is it financially feasible for us to do that?
All right. So, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm more confident in our attorneys to look into this. The other thing is, I don't believe they have the R2 license forever. Eventually, that comes up, and as you said, there's no current contract with the town of Fairfield. So maybe I'm missing the gap here, where we're essentially, who makes the selection via the state of Connecticut that AMR is the best company for our residents?
So and I've had this conversation with Mr. Lesser, and he is certainly willing and interested in helping us pursue these issues. The license agreement through the State Department of Public Health does provide AMR the right to the service area, and it does also give certain rights to the community to challenge that license agreement. And certainly we'll look into how to approach that. We don't want to pursue that unless there is a financial benefit to the town, and I'm not sure that we are at that point of making that decision.
Okay, I guess I'll close on this. I believe there's a high level of revenue we're leaving on the table, which would help offset this budget.
Let me add, the fire department is interested in providing this service. From the management to the union and the members of the department, there's significant interest in the department, on behalf of the department, to pursue this level of care, because we think it's a natural extension of what we're doing already. However, that said, it would be foolhardy to suggest that this is an easy decision to make, or that it is automatically going to be financially beneficial for the town.
Right.
If you're talking about buying additional ambulances, staffing those ambulances, there's a significant overhead cost that has to be weighed against any potential revenue.
I agree with what you're saying, and I guess I'll close on this, my second closing. One, we want to have the best police department. We want to have the best fire department. We want to have the best schools. So when we have a resident who is injured, we pass it off to a private company. A private company who has to balance the books, who doesn't have the accountability, their accountability is to shareholders or profit margins. We don't know, we're under the assumption that they've updated all their ambulances with the best equipment possible. We're under so many assumptions when we have a resident, and it's not hard to look at. We can look at our surrounding towns to see the investment they've made in their ambulance service. So, again, my point is I think we're leaving revenue on it, and I also think we're getting to the point where we're getting close to doing a disservice to our residents by not fully committing ourselves in this, one way or another here.
Thank
Chair,
you.
if I may.
On this topic?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, just some background. This was something that, when I looked at the MR contract a couple of years ago, that came up in the administration's discussions, and we spoke with the prior chief about it, and we started a process, and there's some truth to what both the chief and the selectman is saying, but it's a very complex issue, as the chief is pointing out, and basically the decision was made to hold off until we had a new chief, and the discussion regarding this issue was part of the discussions in the hiring process of the chief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Walsh had a follow-up on this point.
I think we got to invest in some more microphones first before this ambulance stuff.
They intentionally put you at a place without.
I know. It's going to be a long night. I'm going to wear out that cord. Mr. Timiak, since you work for Stratford and you've worked for Ansonia, two of the communities you mentioned, can you give us an idea of the amount of revenue and expenses that you see in those two towns, just to give me some sense of what this significant amount of revenue that we're leaving on the table is?
All right. So, Ansonia is not the best example because they have a very low insurance rate for potential cardholders. They were making about $750,000 a year in revenue. They were offsetting it with equipment, and they had more of a volunteer ambulance EMS service there. So the total cost breakdown for the small town of Ansonia, they were pulling in profit-wise close to, I want to say $150,000 to $200,000. Every month they would give a profit report of how much money the ambulance service would take in. Now mind you, that's a community of 18,000 residents and low collectibles, because about 50% of their calls were going to, maybe higher, maybe 55 were going to people who didn't have insurance, so there's no way to bill there. Stratford, I believe the numbers are close to hovering around $2 million in revenue, offset through an EMS fund they have, and I guess they pay the town $400,000 a year through the EMS fund, which is done through there. So they have to run a profit like a business, like our rec department, like we talk about. To pull there, and then they pay a rental fee to the town of $400,000 a year, which gets put in the budget, and they operate everything fully from purchasing equipment to that type of thing.
Okay, Mr.
I mean, we can look at Westport and we can look at Trumbull as well.
Thank you.
I have a question. I want to go back to something. Oh, Dave, are you on this topic?
Yeah, but I mean, if you want to go,
No, go ahead, and then I want to go back on something that the chief said. Go right ahead.
so really quickly, and I brought this up now at the quarterlies a couple times, we talk about things and then they kind of go by the wayside. Is there some sort of date range that we should anticipate, maybe be able to put this on a follow-up, or the BOS to do it, so that there's sort of some conclusion to this conversation? First, we talked about it, and it kind of went out there, and whatever happened or didn't. So do we have an idea?
Chief, have you put together a
6
game
months,
plan?
year? I mean, it doesn't.
So our or my approach has been, there are a number of issues that I need to resolve in the operation of our core mission. I am now 5 months on the job in Fairfield. I love it. But there's a certain amount of work that I need to do to make sure that, you know, the work that's represented in this budget is tight and is solid. We have an excellent fire department, but we have lacked some long-range planning, some of the issues that the deputy has referred to. I need to resolve those issues first before I venture into new business models. When you think of the impact of providing paramedic level EMS, we are now a healthcare provider as opposed to a R1, which you know, not to diminish the work that the fire department does at medical college, but there is a legal component of paramedicine that is far and above what we do right now. And the hiring, I mean, everything changes in the fire department. Everything changes in the fire department as a result of getting into potentially putting 2 ambulances on the road, staffing them with 2 to 6 people, training new personnel to paramedic level, and there is a challenge in attracting firefighters as paramedics. There are a limited number that come out of certification every year, and let alone the accounting side of that. So to both of your questions, I think that, you know, my approach is I need 6 to 8 months to get the core mission issues largely resolved, or at least a better planning model, so that next year when we come with this budget, we are better prepared and have the backup documentation that says we have planned out all of these expenses for 2, 3, 5, 10 years. Once we have accomplished that, we will delve deep into the opportunities to expand into EMS. That's not to say that we're not doing that research now. We have several members of the department are conducting research into and through national organizations to understand what are the cost benefits and what are the expenses, and we're doing that work right now. This is not stop one and then start another, but this is we need to get some of these core issues resolved for the department, so that we can give pretty clear attention to the next opportunity.
Can you, Mr. Mayor, can you update us on the quarterly reports as to where this stands? And what's going forward on this? Thank you, Chief, it makes sense.
And if I may, I think the first step would be to have an opinion from Mr. Lesser on just what is the legal rights of the town, and some information about the collectibles that are currently being realized by AMR, and some order of magnitude costs for operations of the fire department. That is not work that it would take too much time, and I think that would be a good place to start, at least to start to wrap our arms around this issue.
Thank you.
Got another question.
Becker, you're good? On this again?
Yes.
Go ahead.
What's the percentage of medical calls the fire department responds to?
60%.
60% of the calls are medical calls. What's the percentage of fire calls? Smoke and flame?
10.
10. All right. So 60% of the calls they're responding to, we pass off to AMR.
Thank you.
I do want to just comment about the level of service that we get from AMR. We have some of our own members that work for AMR. We have, over the past 2 weeks, demonstrated a couple of times the quality of care that exists in the town, the engagement of private citizens in the continuum of care. We've been recognized by the Department of Public Health, received a Heart Safe designation. The system works. and is very, very effective. I have yet, and I don't know if anyone, and I haven't heard in my circle any complaint about the quality of care, whether it's from the fire department, the police department, or from AMR in pre-hospital care.
I don't want to give the impression that I'm saying the system doesn't work. I want to give the impression that we're leaving revenue on the table.
I understand.
And I want to make sure I have the clear, this is something we need to seriously look into.
But we don't have a hands-off approach to AMR. It's a very, very much a hands-on partnership with them, and I think that we respect the quality that they give.
I should hope so, because, again, we're passing our residents, who you guys treat first, off to them. So I should hope that we have, our thumb on them when we can.
All right, thank you. I want to go back to a comment that was made by the chief earlier. And I want to make sure I understood the comment. New team came in this year due to retirements, took a fresh look at the budget, took a fresh look at existing numbers, existing expenditures, and came across the fact that there were things that were classified inappropriately within the expense line items. So, for an example, something might have been classified in maintenance and repair that should have been in fees and professional services, right?
Right.
Is that fair enough?
Yep.
So that what you're saying is, hey, basically when you look at the budget year over year, factoring in the compensation changes and all that, the total increase in expenditures are about 2% for the department as a whole. But your explanation is, within individual line items, there seems to be large variances because of these misclassifications. Is that?
Yeah, the 17 budget
Yep.
is a result of an analysis of what has been spent.
Yep.
That we should, within each of those lines, given hopefully without any significant bumps in the road, like the frame rail corrosion issue that we're dealing with right now, if the problems that we expect come up and we deal with them, the lines that we represent to you in our 2017 budget is what we will spend for each of those. That we won't be needing to transfer or send or charge an account inappropriately to make up for a shortfall in another.
What you just said is what concerns me a little bit about the current year and previous years. Because there should be controls in place that stop things from being charged against the inappropriate accounts. Because if things are being charged against inappropriate accounts, that means the funds aren't being spent the way they were intended to be spent. For example, if this board says you should be repairing the firehouses because you've made a compelling case, and then during the course of the year, you decide to take those funds and buy boots.
Booze?
Boots.
Okay.
You said that.
I'm
not
new
me.
here. I just want to.
Or booze. Then we're not getting what we thought we invested in. Right? So, Mr. Mayor, question for you, because this is the first time this has come up. What are the processes in place to catch that department heads aren't doing that? Or not even department heads, but who's ever responsible within the department for coding?
Yeah, the process, or the way that Munis was set up initially, was that if any account was over budget, you had to call the finance department, get a code, and use that code to enter an expense when the account was fully spent. And basically what happened was, and this is obviously before my time and into my time, and what was happening, of course, people would learn the codes. Some people were using the code for one versus another instead of the correct codes. This came to my attention a couple of years ago, I guess. There were two departments, fire being one, that used this quite a bit, and we held meetings and discussions, and what we did was we changed the Munis roll-up so you didn't have to have a code for every individual department, that as long as your department was under budget, you would be able to go over budget in any specific line item. So this eliminated the need and the incentive for people to miscode. So that's the first thing.
But they're still miscoding, right? Basically,
I'm not mischarging. No, I think it's, I don't, well, is there still miscoding? Probably some, yes. But I don't think there's mischarging anymore.
He
and-
just said there was,
Well, the chief said that there was in the past.
this past year.
Right
now.
We're not misquoting now.
No, you
And
may have,
in our initial conversation with the selectmen and the finance director in preparation of our first, or in the presentation of our budget, we understood the process. If we are to go over budget in any one line, what is the method to do that? And I think that that's been pretty clear, and that's how we've been operating. However, the budget that's been built is based on this year's budget. Next year's budget is different because we have evaluated where all those costs are and correctly apportioned our budget around those costs.
so when we're looking at your budget at the end of this year, if we're looking at the variances, it seems to me that within individual line items, there's going to be significant variances between budget and actual for fiscal year 2016. Because fiscal year 2016 budget was built on erroneous information because the charges were put into accounts that weren't the appropriate accounts. And what you're saying is, we rectified that now, we're coding correctly, so this year our actuals are going to be more accurate, and therefore we're going to have many more variances in line item over line item for this fiscal year.
So we have evaluated where we are in the budget, and we do that every quarter.
Yep.
And looked at where our shortfalls, if any, and I believe that we expect to be able to stay within the budget in the whole, as a whole, in the aggregate. I don't know of any lines where we will end up going over budget, except for apparatus maintenance, which is an issue that we've dealt with separately.
Yeah, well, I don't think that the chief wants to leave the impression that every line item was misbudgeted, but there were, there was a couple of catch-all budgets, and I don't remember line items, and I don't know whether if it was like maintenance and repair or building and grounds or whatever, that were used as catch-alls, but, it's been corrected.
I still don't understand the process, and we don't need to go through it here, I don't need to waste any more time, but I'm concerned by the comments that the miscodings weren't caught before the actuals were reported in previous years, and that perhaps when we're looking at some of these actuals, like for 2015, there's monies that are said that we spent in fees and professional services that maybe were in another line item because they were quote-unquote intentionally miscoded in order to stay within budget on individual line items. That's troublesome to me.
Yeah,
Should be somebody watching it.
Yeah, like I said, this was identified in, I think, 14 or 15, and corrective action was taken.
What? No,
Yes.
not by what the chief is saying. Because he's saying that the budget for 16 was based on bad information because it wasn't corrected in 15. That's what he said. Paraphrasing.
So there was the latitude, if you will,
Yep.
and all with the best intentions to stay within budget.
I'm not trying to impugn anybody, I'm trying to understand it.
And it may be a matter of convenience to charge. Where do we charge this to? We have nothing left in this for office supplies. Where do we charge this to? And so these relatively minor expenses are then being put into the wrong bucket. And
I understood it when you said it.
I don't think that, that it is, certainly we have been religious about making sure that we are coding all of our expenses exactly to the budget. We have a process with the finance department, if we expect to go over budget, how to do that, and how to rectify it at the end of the year, saving, anticipating a shortfall in one budget, going over budget, but limiting expenditures in others so that there is a reserve. So in the aggregate, we would be able to end up in the black. So we're doing all of that.
Mr. Mayor, do the other departments go through a similar rigor given that what we found here?
Like I said, it was primarily two departments. We've had the discussions with all departments, and I'm fairly confident that, obviously there's miscodings once in a while.
Sure, there's errors.
Yeah,
I mean, I get it.
But I'm fairly confident that everybody is on board and following the procedures.
Mrs. Leclerc? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief.
Actually, between the chief and Mr. Mayor, they just explained something to me that's been troubling me for a while, and it probably happened in 2012. And that is that at one time when we did our cleanup vote for the transfers, we used to get a whole list of line by line and have to vote on the entire budget, and we actually saw where the accounts went over and where the budget was. And but now Caitlin Bossy does a cleanup before it comes to us, and as long as the department budget is within the right total, she matches it all up and cleans it up. So I think what we have is a budgeting problem, that year after year we keep the lines the same, but then the actual expenses are shifted, but then at the very end of the year we clean it all up, so our board doesn't actually see the whole cleanup of it.
The actual that you see in the budget document is the actual. It's pre-cleanup.
So it's the actual expense?
It's the actual.
Okay.
I understand your question, but there is a cleanup, there are transfers. Those transfers are made between budgets, if you, well, no, that's not. The actual recorded expenses in Munis are correct based upon what was expensed. The cleanup transfers between the budgets within a department and between departments do not affect the final actuals that are posted in Munis that come onto this document.
Right.
But the reason you would have seen all those lines maybe was because they didn't, because the policy in those days was every line item had to be rolled up. There was no roll-ups. Right. And so now we roll up within the department to eliminate that issue.
Mr. Flynn?
That doesn't solve the issue of the actuals, though. Right.
No,
Yeah.
but
Go ahead, Mr. DeWitt.
I just want to follow up on Mrs. Leclerc's comment, because this has been my comment for years. If you look at a June 30th Munis report, and at the bottom of all the line items for an individual department, it says 90%. It gets rectified among moving individual accounts, and most of the time, the sacrificial accounts are travel and meetings and postage, those kind of things all get rolled up. So if you could run us a June 30th, 2015 Munis report, you would see exactly what you're talking about, Mr. Chairman. You'd see a budget that might be at 100%, but individual line items might be overspent by 20%, whatever. And they just get, and as Mrs. Leclerc said, they just get, not to hide the issue, but they do. They get rolled up to show a number as a total and not individual line items.
they get rolled up because it's required that the town have a balanced budget, and departments have balanced budgets. But the actuals reported in your document are the actuals pre-roll-up, pre-transfer.
I'm
I'm
not,
I-
I'm not
I-
saying they are. What I
I
think,
can't speak to exactly what Munis report and you're referring to, and maybe want to bring Ms. Bossi in to maybe go into
I'm
elaborate
saying the
detail on this.
last day of the fiscal year.
Yeah, yeah, I
Before
can't.
we do any adjustments, there are always, because I look at them, there's always an account that's fairly well underrun, and there's always one that's overrun. But yet, we reconcile the account at 100% with actuals as a total, but we never say, much to Mrs. Claire's point, that, for example, travels and meetings, $2,000 every year. That's a sacrificial account. Every year, that $2,000 gets placed in somewhere else to get to the 100%.
I
So I'm
don't,
telling you, if you run a report, June 30th, 2015, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about.
yeah,
I guarantee it.
I can't.
I just don't have
I
it.
can't respond to your reports. What I'm responding to is your budget book. The actuals in the budget book, my understanding, I am not a detail Munis expert, and Ms. Bossi, as I said, you might want to bring her in. My full understanding, because I've asked this question, going through the process in brief, the actuals in the budget book are the actuals pre-roll-up.
And Mr. Mayor, can I stop you right there? Because you might be 100% right on that. 100% right. I would still argue that based on what I heard tonight, those numbers could be absolutely wrong.
And I think I said that there was a couple of departments
Yep.
that used a couple of accounts for catch-alls, and that we don't do that anymore. That's correct, both correct statements.
That's all I was saying.
Yeah, correct.
Mr.
So
Chief.
if I may just,
Yeah,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
DeWitt. No, go right ahead. Please, go right ahead.
Yep, travels and meetings for the fire department last year was approved budget of $6,500. The actuals, and you're correct, in our budget book say $1,523. $4,500 roughly went to another line item. That is accurately reflected here in the totals, but that budget line item still this year is now at $8,000. I think Mrs. Sinclair's point is, every year we budget, 6,500, 6,500, 6,500, and a year we spend, I'm on travels and meetings, just to pick one, for the fire department. It's consistently budgeted around $6,500,
Right, and you see the...
but yet you only spend
the-
$1,500.
you
So that
see- no,
means
well,
that,
in 13, we spent 9,000, in 14, we spent 5,000, in 15, we spent 1,500.
I'm just picking one year because I have the number.
You're proving my point, is that the actuals are the actuals, not the rolled-up budget.
I understand, I'm agreeing with you. I'm telling you that the budgeted number for the next year, for this year, is now up to $8,000. Why isn't it at $1,500? Again, it's a
that's why we're
sacrificial
here.
account that goes to somewhere else.
No,
every single year.
that's what the purpose of this meeting is.
Okay.
Is for this body to make...
Okay, let's move
inquiry
on
of
so we
the-
don't... Chief? Chief, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, there was, there are some clear examples. The 55,300 account for communications in fiscal year 14, the actual was 20,000. In 15, it is 19,000, and this year's budget is 18,000. Those are the issues that we're correcting in the 17 budget. Because clearly we're spending more, opposite, and the exact opposite case of what you're referring to, Mr.
Right.
DeWitt. But we're spending more, but budgeting less in subsequent years when our use of technology and communication is expanding. To reflect that, we have requested $24,000. That is the type of analysis that we have done in this budget to present to you an accurate reflection of where we're spending money.
And I think that's great.
that's
I, for one, greatly appreciate it. I think the whole board does. I think what the commentary points out is what it raised to me was a concern that we don't have a level of review that might not be plausible, given resources and everything else, to make sure that things are coded without, obviously, there's errors that are made, human error, right? But not intentionally miscoded to stay within a budget, right? To stay within a budget line item. And that is troubling because we want to make sure that, although we sign off on the department budget as a whole, we know what's going in the line items, particularly when it comes to departments like your own, where we believe, or one of the things we're trying to do is make sure that we give you enough money so that you've got the appropriate equipment for safety purposes. And I'd hate to hear, and I'm not saying this happened, but I'd hate to hear that that money was diverted for something else worthwhile, but it wasn't the apparatus we thought we were buying. It was, holes in a roof or something. Do you understand?
I understand.
I hope I'm being clear. I'm not trying to, that's not an accusation, that's not.
I think that the department in the past and in the present, and certainly in the future, will meet the expectation that we are addressing the priorities in the budget.
Right.
That have been
Good way to
funded by
put
the
it.
Board of Finance in the town, and we'll work through the Finance Department to make sure that any variances get coded or adjusted through a procedure that
And-
is transparent.
And at least it's accurate.
Yep.
That's the most
That's
important
my
thing,
goal.
it's accurate. You guys on a day-to-day basis need to make some judgment calls, understood, but we want it accurate, that's all. Anybody else? Mr. Walsh?
I don't know if this is going to come from Bob or Tom, maybe you can, if we set up this budget and we have budget lines, the departments are allowed to go over them on their own? So, for example, I'm not going to say the chief would ever do this, but let's just take this as an example. The chief's not happy that he didn't get his SUV. He decides to buy his SUV. Anyway, despite what the first selectman cutting it. But he cuts back on maintenance and repair of some of the firehouses by $38,000. He can do that, right? Okay, what's the control that he can't do that?
When the purchase requisition comes through, it goes through a number of people who need to approve it. One of the approvals is mine, and on capital specifically, I matched the item approved within reason on the price.
So because it's a car, you would catch it because you'd need to have an invoice with a requisition.
That's correct.
Okay, but other areas he could do it. Other areas he could go over by
Well, he could buy
$50,000 and you wouldn't
He
know.
could buy more pencils and pens instead of tires.
Hmm?
That's
Or he
what
could
needs.
repair, say he wanted to repair one of the firehouses. And just starts doing some more maintenance repair at the fire stations. He can do that? I just don't know what the control is here. If we set a budget, what's the control that prevents any department from going over on specific line items that we don't know about? Because...
Well, you end up knowing about it, because it comes forth in the actual, it comes forth in the year-end transfers. So you do know about it, that's the response to that part of it.
But it could be too late, the money could be spent.
Well, it would be spent by the end of the year, correct. But, we have, and we started this, 2 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago now, I think, the quarterly reviews. And we go through the departments, with the departments, through their budgets, where they are, what's over, what's under,
Well, and-
why, how come.
Mr. Mayor, your explanation is very accurate, but it assumes one thing, that the controls are in place to make sure that the expense is coded accurately when it's incurred.
Yeah, and that is, I guess, is subject to 2 or 3 sets of eyes. One, from the broader perspective, with respect to materiality, of course, is the annual audit, and the other is the accounts payable clerks, who are instructed and to do their best to identify that the expense type is what it is.
And the point's well taken, and that leads me all the way back to my being disconcerted over the explanation that there was miscoding going on in order to stay within budgeted line items, so things were intermingled within the department. Because then, to that point, it wouldn't pop on a quarterly report. It wouldn't pop on an annual report, right? It wouldn't be a capital item, Mrs. Gardner, as you said. It wouldn't be a fire truck, right? But it could be other things. So the control has to be, to your point, Mr. Mayor, that there's other people that are checking the coding, right? And saying, this isn't right, it should be in this account, right?
That's correct, sir.
And Mr. Chair, if I might, I don't want this to reflect on the department heads. They're doing a yeoman's job month in, month out to get this running right. Now, there certainly are times, as we saw last year with snow clearing,
Yep.
where we're definitely over budget, and it's obvious to everybody from what's going on. certainly there was a culture in the past, because Munis wouldn't allow it, to keep things moving, that folks started changing things. And Mr. Mayor is correct in terms of his coming in and establishing that we want to track actuals. And because we're spending a lot of time reviewing the last 3 years of actuals, trailing averages, that type of thing, we're focused more on actuals, I believe, than in the past in terms of going through this. So everybody's got is much more conscious of how important getting the actuals correctly coded in the correct lines they are. I think for the most part, our department heads are doing a very good job in that.
I don't want anybody to take it as a criticism of the department heads. It's what happens on a day-to-day basis when you have people trying to live within the confines of a system, right? It's just what happens, and that's why you need a system of checks and balances to make sure that it stays in balance.
Yeah, again, my point was just to make sure everybody's clear the department heads really are doing their best to do an accurate job and to reflect that, so we can get a better job, do a better job of both budgeting but also managing the town.
Okay. Mr. Walsh, you got cut off there.
Does it make sense to have the internal auditor occasionally go through these payables to make sure that the right ones are hitting the certain accounts? We have an internal auditor, so why not have them go through and randomly, at her leisure, pick certain accounts and just start going through and making sure the proper people are billing things to the right accounts in all the departments?
Yeah, well, she has very little leisure, but that certainly could be an assignment, no question.
I mean, it just sounds like if we're going to have an internal auditor, they should be looking out for things like this.
Point well taken. All right, so the upshot of this is the budget request on an apples-to-apples basis is a 2.14% increase year over year, once accounting for in 2016 the transfer from contingency into the department to account for settled contracts. There are some variances within line items, which the chief has explained are really reclassifications for certain types of expense and some cleanup work. The personnel numbers remain unchanged year over year, and we do have an increase in capital here on an ongoing basis, which is one thing the first selectman cut out. Are there any questions on the fire department budget other than accounting issues?
I'm sorry, just before you do that, it's actually 1.69%, because the chief didn't take into account the first selectman's cut.
Thank you very much. We'll go over.
Less than 2%.
Thank you very much. We'll go over Mr. Walsh.
With having a new chief and a new deputy chief, I'd just like to get your opinions, just broad opinions, and now looking at this budget and looking at how the department runs and being other places. In regards to the overtime, do you think we manage overtime properly? Are there changes you see coming down the line? Are we in line with the way, say, chief overtime was handled in Norwalk? Are these the same similar kind of numbers based on the size of us versus them that you would see down in Norwalk?
So the numbers are similar.
Okay.
I think that, what we have seen, my impression of the department, I think that the deputy will echo this, is we have a number of people that are actively engaged because we represent the administration of the department. And when you think of the total scope of the services that are provided by the department and the work that's been done or being done, it's more than two people can give proper attention to not only evaluate but develop opportunities and to advance the department in meeting its mission. So we have a number of people that are actively engaged in the administration of the department that is reflected in some of those lines. We do have the benefits that are afforded under the labor agreement are consistent with slight differences here and there, but they're consistent with other communities. The number of vacancies that we carry, in Norwalk, we carried 8 vacancies. We had a 140-man department. We carried 8 vacancies were filled with overtime. Fairfield, with roughly 100 members in the department, we have 4 vacancies. So there is that equivalency between the approach and management of the department, management of the budget, staffing of the department. So I think that it is consistent, and I'll let the deputy speak in relationship to Yonkers.
Yonkers, well, this is probably being broadcast, so I don't know. But I think our...
Be careful, Yonkers is watching.
No, I know, Yonkers is watching, so I hope it doesn't get back to them. But I think I find that our overtime for sick leave and injury is a lot less here per capita, absolutely. I think we have stricter controls, I think stricter oversight, and so I think you could feel confident in that part without saying more.
Okay, I think you've answered the question. It just, with a fresh set of eyes on this thing, and, you know, we had a previous management there for a while, it's good to hear, you know, with fresh set of eyes, and different experiences at different departments.
I have to compliment my predecessors. The department that they left us and managed for you is pretty remarkable. I mean, my impression is this is a very progressive department. When we think of EMS, you know, certainly I look at that opportunity knowing that I have a staff that's capable of meeting that challenge if that's the direction we go. But we have very well-educated, bright, progressive, hardworking, community-oriented staff firefighters that every day that they're looking to do the job better than they did yesterday. And I think that that is reflective in, you know, the feedback that we get from the community, that the types of service and the success that we have in delivering that service. So aside from the mechanics of running the department, I think it's very important that we commend the people who are actually doing the work. It's not the deputy and I. The people who are doing the work every day and risking their lives are extraordinary. And that is my impression of the Fairfield Fire Department, that supersedes anything that goes on paper. It's more important than anything goes on paper.
So we shouldn't be seeing any major changes in direction of, whether it be from equipment to personnel to anything else going forward from where you're sitting right now?
There are a couple of things that are on the horizon. The staff in fire prevention certainly is a weakness of the department, given our statutory obligation to inspect facilities, anything that is above a two-family, all the commercials, in addition to plan review for all of the work that's being done every day in construction. The backlog that exists in plan reviews is, you know, we have 30-day legal limit. Well, that's very hard if you're ready to go and want to start construction and you're put in a queue. So my concern, first and foremost, looking longer term, is staffing in the fire marshal's office. Some supervision. We have 2 vehicles that staff with 3 firefighters. Long term, I would like to see an officer in that position. So I think that it's not I don't see it as a radical change. I think it's consistent with how other fire departments staff and supervise. But that, I think, will be one of the areas that I would look to resolve going forward. As far as equipment and deployment, we are and have evaluated. One of the concerns, and I'm glad that I have the opportunity, you know, the issue comes up fairly consistently. Why do you send that big truck to those calls? You know, it's a minor call. Well, we have 3 firefighters that are being paid very well to be on that piece of equipment. The piece of equipment costs us $90 a day over the life of its vehicle, just for the purchase price. It costs $90 a day, whether it moves or not. The firefighters are significantly more expensive. Am I saving that $90 by keeping that truck in the barn, or sending those 3 firefighters to provide life-saving service at an EMS call? To suffer the feedback, why you're sending a fire truck to an EMS call? I think that it's good use of personnel. It's the company car. We send them with the company car because that's what they'll use to go to the vehicle accident that might come in before they return to station or a fire call. So, you know, we evaluate every deployment, how we send, what we send, how many we send, and we have reduced the number of runs by vehicle type to be responsible, so we're not overcommitting resources, but we do have to send that big red truck to some calls that to outsiders may appear to be an overcommitment of resources.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the fire department budget? Mr. Becker?
Just on the capital line with the SUV, it looked like it was a first selectman reduction, but the deputy made a comment that seemed to lean towards you guys had pulled it out at some stage. I guess so the question is who
So we,
zeroed it? and
we
what's
owe
plan?
the selectmen a vehicle replacement plan, and the selectmen and I have an agreement to meet in April. We did receive 2 vehicles from the police department as part, for staff vehicles. My goal is to get everybody out of rear-wheel drive Crown Victorias and into all-weather, all-wheel drive vehicles. And there's a cut that certainly we can accommodate and or address next year.
And were the vehicles that you got from police the 4-wheel drive, or are they still, cycling through some of the other vehicles?
Yeah, they will be assigned to the fire marshal's office.
But I mean, they'll be getting 4-wheel drive, the 2 you just
All-wheel drive
mentioned?
vehicles, yep.
They will be all-wheel?
Yep.
So we are starting to, okay.
Right.
Yeah, that's good.
Any other questions on the fire department? Seeing none, gentlemen, thank you very much.
We have a couple other budgets.
You do.
If you are
We
letting
will-
us go without discussing them, that's fine.
No, we are not.
Okay.
I just want to thank you for that one, because that was long. All right, we're going to go to page 226, 227, hydrants and water. Numbers are on 227. Questions from board members on this? There's a note here, expiration of a tangible property regulation credit. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And it's not coming back, is that the case?
Yes, there's a credit, actually I have it here.
That was a credit that resulted from that was applied because of prior year's overcharge. The overcharge has been captured, so it's discontinued.
I did not hear what you just said. Could you repeat it? I'm sorry.
There was an overcharge in prior years that was paid back through that credit. The overcharge has been covered, so the credit goes away.
How much was that credit? Do you remember?
I don't. I don't know the total. But
Can you get that to us, just so that we know?
yeah.
Thank you. Any other credit? Credit. Any other questions?
That was a statewide issue, just so you know.
Okay. Any other questions on this budget? Seeing none, I'm going to move on. I'm going to go to emergency management, which is page 228. The numbers are on 229. Oh, excellent. Thank you very much, Chief. Pass this along. Thank you for that. Oh, no problem. We are on emergency management. This budget increase is 2.5%. The largest increase other than salary is really special department supplies of $600.
Yes, that's,
And this is again a union contract off. Go ahead.
okay. That's special department supplies, and we use that to supply the CERD organization, which is a volunteer organization, which provides us a lot of help during emergencies, such as storms, and they're a very vibrant organization which volunteers their time. I think we have, how many, Norma? 60 members? Over 60 members, active members. We can always call upon them when we need something, when we need help during the marathon, when we need help during storms, during, they ran the shelters up at Ludlow during Sandy. And we use this money to buy them vests so that they're highly visible, and to give them, to buy them equipment. And so we're finding that we're coming short and we just asked for a request up to $2,000 from $1,400.
Thank you. Questions on emergency management? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go to emergency communications. This is page 231. I guess you guys are doing this together, or are you leaving? Okay, before you leave then, first of all, I do want to thank you for tonight. And second of all, are there any comments from the public on the fire, hydrant, water, or emergency management budgets? You can come forward, state your name, and make your comment. Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Appreciate it very much. We'll go to the emergency communications budget.
Yeah, good evening, Chief Sheriff.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Basically, we know the Communications Center is responsible for all the communication needs of both the fire department and police department, both emergency radio systems, phone systems, and any radio communications with the electronic equipment back and forth from vehicles to headquarters. Building out the budget, I tried to keep it as flat as possible. In fact, some of these increases you see are either contractual or obligations to regional assets. And I just open it up to any questions you might have on what we presented.
Okay, any questions? We have a 0.5% increase. Mr. Walsh?
The overtime earnings / replacement line, is that to cover while we're training people to the overtime that needs to be? What is that line for, the difference between regular overtime earnings and overtime replacement?
Overtime earnings are if, let's say during a storm, I have to hold somebody over for like an extra position, we want to fill a fourth position, those type of events where we're bringing in somebody extra, or there's some limited administrative overtime where we're doing, paperwork, some of the payroll issues. The overtime replacement is the replacement for your sick, vacation, holidays, comp time, contractual time off that our dispatchers get.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Walsh?
No.
Any other questions? Mr. DeWitt?
If I may ask a capital question?
Yes.
$6,400 a cleaning service. Why is that capital and not under, I don't know, special departmental supplies or cleaning and janitorial supplies services?
I put it under this line because we do a daily cleaning. We have a cleaning service come in. This is something special that we would look to do every couple years, and there's specific companies out there that they'll come in and actually take apart the wiring and clean the wiring behind consoles.
Oh, got it.
And really get into the equipment, which is not a day-to-day, week-to-week. This is, every few years we would look to do this, which is why I put under capital.
No. That's very appropriate. Thank you.
Any other questions on emergency communications? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go right to the police department budget, which is page 215. Thank you very much. You have a good night.
That's done. You still stick around.
Hi, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Do you guys happen to have a revised schedule? I see the big black column there.
I think maybe Linda might have that, or...
a couple weeks ago. That was very useful, so I want to thank you guys for putting those schedules together. So if we could pass those out, if we have them for the board. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, sir. All right, so what we have this before us, what we have before us very similar is what they refer to as the 2016 revised budget for the comparison. And before we get going on it, I want to, Mrs. Gardner, Mr. Mayor, these revised budget numbers, I just want to confirm they come from your department?
Correct.
Okay. So these are from the Finance Department, and they show, based on transfers that were done after last year's budget, to account for the settlement of the contracts, a budget increase of 3.07 for the department year over year, correct? And the first selectman left it unchanged, so I'm going to say it's the exact same amount, okay? Let's turn it over.
Just a real brief opening, if I can. First of all, I
Sure,
want to
please.
thank the Deputy Chief, Chris Liddy, who obviously works hard on not only this current budget that we're in now, but also presenting this budget. Obviously, you met Captain Don Smith, who oversees our Emergency Communications Center, and Captain Josh Zavins here from the Patrol Division. Also, I saw Lieutenant Keith Broderick walk in here. Also, he's one of our shift commanders, and there are two police commissioners here, Commissioner Norma Peterson and Commissioner Susan Barrett, who is also present with us today. And as a brief, very brief overview, we have 108, we are funded for 108 sworn police officers. During 2015, we had 2 lieutenants retire, 2 officers retire, 1 civilian staff retire, as well as one of our canine officers retire. Actually, one of our canines retire. We've also hired 4 officers last year in 2015, all of whom had previous law enforcement experience, meaning that they are hired and they do not go to the academy. That was last year in 2015. So right now we are currently staffed to 105 officers. We are currently in the hiring process. We have 1 commitment for an officer who will start the police academy April 1st. That will leave us at 106 officers. We also anticipate over the next few months probably 3 more retirements, and we're still in the hiring process twofold. 1 is new recruits. As I said, 1 is going to the academy in April 1st, which is an 8-month process at least, so that'll leave that hired but vacant spot. And we're also looking at certified officers who may be interested in coming to our department. Last year, in 2015, we saw our most calls for service in the last 13 or 14 years. That's at 44,982. So that's the most calls for service we've had in 14 years. And that doesn't account for some of the other interactions that our officers may have on a daily basis. Obviously, as many of you probably are aware, we've been challenged as a police organization. We face those challenges based upon the men and women who are sworn and non-sworn in our police department, who work day in and day out. And I have to add our 911 operators. Any calls that officers go for, high-profile calls or whatnot, there is a 911 operator in the basement of the Fairfield Police Department that is dealing with individuals on the phone dispatching those calls for service. Just in addition to that, we've just put on 2 canine officers, new canines, that were fully funded through donations, and received grant funding over the last year, as you all well know, for our smaller marine vessel, as well as a $213,000 DUI grant, allows for increased DUI enforcement, $8,000 in seatbelt enforcement money through the state, and we just recently, from the First Selectman, got a email this afternoon that we received a $40,000 grant to increase our distracted driving enforcement. So just to kind of give you an overview flavor of, I don't get an opportunity many times to touch on what we've done. I do, if you can bear with me for one more second, because
Sure.
it's important to note. In 2015, we've seen a significant reduction in a lot of crime within the town of Fairfield. We are putting together a yearly report that will be available. It's not completed yet, but just to kind of give you an example of that, in 2015, we saw a 42% reduction in larcenies in the town of Fairfield, a 3% reduction in motor vehicle theft, a 40-some-odd% reduction in the amount of burglaries, a 47% reduction in the amount of assaults, a 33% reduction in robberies, and a 10% decrease in the amount of vandalism. We did see a slight increase in the amount of sexual violations that we believe is due to an operation that we did in town that resulted in several arrests. But as you can see, the work and the effort that they put forth is showing, at least this year, with that reduction in crime, and I just want to point that out also.
Thank you very much. Those are good stats.
But we're here to talk about budget, so I leave it open to all of you.
What a setup there, Chief.
It's important to, it's really, honestly, it really is important. I don't get the opportunity to do it much, but to recognize the work that the men and women in the department do.
Thank you very much. All right, questions from board members. We'll go to Mr. Timniak first.
Thank you for coming tonight. Just a couple quick questions. One, I noticed your actuals this year for education are up at $50,000. Is that the number you do for sending people to the academy? Is that where that goes?
No, that is contractual, our officers, if they want to be paid for their, correct? College tuition, yes. So we reimburse officers who want to get their bachelor's degree. So that is a very flexible account, but what we've seen is there's many members in the department who are now going for their bachelor's degree. So we are seeing an increase in that. It's very hard to predict, but
Right.
we've seen a lot of officers who are looking to get that. And in fact, if you look at in this year's budget request, I think we've doubled it just because we're anticipating those people that are in process to continue to be in process.
And that is a contractual benefit, which we reimburse for a college expense, correct?
Sure, yes.
Right.
And we look at that benefit, and college education obviously is important in law enforcement, and we look at some of the studies that show that you know, it's up in the air whether or not college education is more valuable than life experience, but there are some indications that the more education people have, the less use of force they're likely to use, and the better off they are in dealing with people. That's not across the board, but certainly we try to encourage our officers to seek that continuing education beyond the academy. The academy is instructional, but at the same time, college education often allows our officers that broader learning, which is, I think, pretty important.
So, I think we spoke earlier on in the year about some revenue ideas I had, which I guess were, you know, pie in the sky stuff, but I'm looking across the board. You know, we're now charging $25 to join a softball team here in town. We raised our marina fees. We've got fees going all over across the plate. And one of the things I've always wondered is, why aren't we charging for home visits to check on people's homes throughout the town?
You mean, so for like vacation?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you know, we have a lot of people who will go to Florida for the winter, and I know a fair amount of them do ask the police to swing by and check. I'm wondering if that's an area which we could put a nominal fee on there. I mean, I like the idea of checking periodically, but if you're habitual about it, you know,
yeah, I think
one of the things that
I think that would be a policy issue, and certainly I would set policy, but maybe a broader discussion for the town to have. And I look at it twofold. You know, people in town, when they go on vacation, it's really an opportunity for us to touch the people in town. Oftentimes, very few times do you get a police officer that helps you. You're either getting them in a traffic stop or a variety of other reasons your house is broken into. So it's really just an additional service that we provide to people. Very rarely do we do long-term house checks. So if somebody were to be gone for the entire winter, we don't necessarily do that. It's more temporary, short-term opportunities to do that. And I would be concerned what the blowback would be, is that you're paying taxes, you're requesting the services of your police department, and then in addition to that, now you've now asked that to swing into my driveway, you know, you're being charged a fee. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly something that we can look at. I don't know whether we have statistics on how many houses we do check. People go on funerals, we'll drive by if we can, and it's never an obligation. That's what's most important about it. There are times when we don't get to the house checks during a particular day because they're doing other things. And my concern would be that if we say that we're contracting with you now to get that service, if we're not there, because we're not really, I mean, I think the visibility and the touching that we're doing for the residents is important, but I don't know what obligation we then have. Is that, why haven't you gone there every day? And if my house does get broken into, did we not, it was the perception that we did something.
Yeah, that was one of my initial thoughts too, and I mean, it's not as simple as just adding a $25 fee to join a softball league, which has been free for years and years and years. So that was one of my thoughts as the town looks to try to drive new revenue sources. I'm not so much concerned about the one-time vacationer per year. It's more about the habitual. going there, and then, essentially the duties and responsibilities do end up falling on the police if we miss something, anyway.
And that model we do have a model where we charge people when we respond to burglar alarms. So the model is there. We give people 2 opportunities to get a free pass. On your 3rd time that we go to your residence, we will begin to charge you a fee because we're continuing to respond.
Yeah, I don't see it being any sort of major revenue generator at all, but that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions, Mr. Walsh?
Good evening. I have a couple questions on a couple of areas. First, your fees and professional service line seems to be going up by 21%. What's the makeup and reasoning for that increase?
Recently, we embarked on a program with body cameras. We purchased a number of body cameras all through donation money. There is a maintenance contract associated with that that's brand new to us, and the cloud storage solution that we chose for this amount of video. So the increase is solely the $15,100 for the maintenance agreement.
That brings up another area I was going to ask at the end, so why don't we stay there for a second. Just during the last year with some of the incidents that's going across the United States, these whole issues regarding body cameras and stuff like that, do you see the department getting to a situation where we have body cameras on all police officers that are on duty?
I think that the national discussion on body cameras is far and wide, and there are agencies around the country that take the approach that every officer is having body cameras, and then there's others that are saying no one's having body cameras, and then there are some that are exploring different options. We fall into the realm of exploring different options. We have purchased 12 body cameras because we feel that they do have a purpose. Now, the purpose will not be on a daily patrol. We're still working through what the procedure will be, but having the ability to have body cameras for some of our officers will be, I think, appropriate to have that, at least in part, a portion of it. The state of Connecticut the legislators did put forth passed a bill that would provide body camera funding to law enforcement. They've made it mandatory for all Connecticut state troopers to have body cameras, and they've offered those grants for municipalities. The problem with the grant is that it has such strict stipulations on it that it would, the cost to each municipality long-term would be tremendous. So I think that in all likelihood, without some other funding source on a national level or a state level to get every single police officer to have a body camera, I don't see that necessarily happening.
Okay, and specifically in regards to departments like ours, because I guess some of the national incidents you see are the people are always thinking about it after the fact. Some major incident happens, where there's some dispute about what happened, and there's a big public uproar, and then everyone says we're going to get body cameras for all our police officers. But they seem to be in more urban areas, I guess. That's the ones I've seen. So I guess nationally, from what you're seeing in your industry, suburban communities like ours, people nationally as a general, I guess, policy are not going there directly?
I think some are, and I think some aren't. I think the important thing to remember is that body cameras do not take the place of good community relationships. And I think that we are fortunate in this community that we do have good relationships overall with the community. Are there some people that disagree with actions or approaches that we take? I'm sure there are, and I know there are. But overall, we have a good, trusting relationship with the community, and that shouldn't take the place of that. But they're all over the place. And I think the important thing to note is the big cost in this is the storage of the videos, and then access to the video.
Both the cost of the storage, but also the length of time you have to store the information. So if you think about all those body cameras going, all shift long, then you put it there, how long do you keep it? 90 days? 90 years. That's where the discussion is focused in a lot of cases. So I applaud Chief. We've been talking, as he said, we're exploring different options so we understand it. It's kind of like buying your first computer. You might not buy 100 for every employee, but you buy one so you start to understand what computers are, what they like, what you can use them for, where they work and where they don't work. and then what the complications are from a liability side, or what the cost projections would be on the town. So we go into this with our eyes open if we choose to move in that direction.
It'll be interesting as cost of storage continually goes down every single year. Every year it gets cheaper. Whether that will be the driving force anymore, or whether there's other reasons why you either don't have them or don't have them. And I can understand why it's a cost-driven concept at this moment.
And it's not just the cost of the hard drive, if you will, which you're absolutely correct in terms of but it's the cost of the management. How do you go back and access something without having to sit there and look at 30 days worth of videos to see something? What's the search criteria? Who stores it? Who has access? Who's allowed to have access? That type of thing. And if somebody FOIs it, what happens from there?
The other area I'd wanted to explore in your budget was the capital line. And then just the difference in that it's gone up by 24%. Did we not fund all 10 cars last year? Is that what the probably driving reason why that happened? How many did we buy last year?
8.
8? How many did we buy? Do you know how many we bought in the last couple of years?
10.
10, but last year we went down to 8.
Yeah, if you remember last year, because of my car accident.
Oh, yes,
And the
that was
timing of
one,
that,
yep.
we just felt that we were gonna get those cars
Yes.
so late into the
That's right.
season, it was worthy of taking advantage of that.
Okay. So we're not falling behind at all in the car purchase. You feel comfortable with the 10 a year?
Yes, yes. And then keep in mind that I know that the fire chief had mentioned that, and I'm sure the first selectman at some point mentioned it at one point or another, but we do have that replacement plan in effect so that the cars that are trickling out on the other end are, if they are useful, and this year we believe that all are, they will trickle down to a variety of different departments, to the fire department, in particular.
I've never seen your cars more popular before.
What's that?
I've never seen your cars more popular before in my life.
Good cars.
People are dying to get them.
All right.
That's a discussion we have with all the department heads once a year in terms of planning out where the excess vehicles will go and what the priorities are.
Any other questions?
I'd like one last question. In regards to the makeup of the department, the personnel, the only real change seemed to be that you took one sergeant and made him a lieutenant. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is that just because you felt that was better management
Well,
of the department?
if you recall, in our school unit,
Yeah.
when we created the school unit, that unit was created as a sergeant's position.
Yes.
And we've moved that sergeant, that supervisor, to the Board of Ed, and obviously now we have some history as to what that unit does. And what we found with that sergeant's position, that sergeant's really developing policy. When you start looking at the makeup of the organization, we don't want first-line supervisors being responsible for the development of policy, and it works better to have that realigned so that that unit will report to the administrative division as others do. And in addition to that, the interaction that sergeant was having is really having high-end discussions with our Board of Ed, with the superintendent of schools and with the deputy superintendent. So we feel that responsibility and that action really is important, that becomes a lieutenant's position.
Thank you.
One last question from me. Education and membership going up by 100%. What's that all about?
Yeah, that's the same issue we talked about before. It's a contractual obligation that officers under a bachelor's degree level will reimburse their education. It's not a great number of officers, so it's a combination of the cost of education.
That's what it was before.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. I didn't take a note on that before, so I missed it. Mr. Stone?
You're requesting 10 cars, but only 2 light bars. Is that because you're using the older light bars for the...
Yeah, we're able to
Transfer 'em.
transfer light bars over from car to car, but obviously all of them cannot be transferred over. Just the lifespan of light bars is not as well off as the lifespan of the cars are.
All set? Any other questions, comments, concerns on this budget? Great. We'll go to animal control briefly. Thank you very much. And we'll come back for any public comment on police and animal control together.
Just to
it's
clarify one thing on our
Yes, and let me say that we'll go over revenue right after I get done with animal control. Thank you.
Just one thing to
Yeah.
clarify, Chris and I had just talked about it. When we talk about the body cameras, the funding, just because it's, I don't want to leave it out there, the funding was also done in part through a JAG grant through the state. So partly donations and partly a grant for the body cameras was received. So just to clarify that in case there's questions down the line.
Thank you very much. And the animal control budget goes up by about $2,000 in total. Are there any questions, comments, or do you have any statements you want to make on this budget?
The only increases in this year's budget are payroll, full-time and part-time, and of course payroll is union contracts, of which we've resolved 2 out of the 3. The only open contract that we have is mid-management. The 2 SEA contracts have been resolved.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments on this budget? All right. Seeing none, I do want to turn to revenue. I want to go to page 47. And there's revenue on both the police side and the animal control side. So if we both want to hang on just a second. For the animal control side, it's exactly flat with last year at 15,502, 15,502. The budget is flat and it's pretty close to the 3-year average. Is there any questions, comments on the animal control revenue budget? Seeing none, let's go to the police revenue, which is coming down a bit. It's at 430,000. Thank you. 430,000. The vast majority of line items are the 3-year average, but what's the parking violation fees are coming down substantially. Do we have, what's going on there?
That's still a Metro Center phenomenon that I think is leveling off at this particular point. Coupled with that, a recent increase in beach, the value of a violation in the beach area, offset by the people not illegally parking there too. But I think we're going to see a leveling off at this point.
Okay. Are there questions, comments on police department revenue? It's going from 466 to 430 is the estimate for this year, and the biggest change is those parking violation fees. Okay, seeing none. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Thanks for all the good work this year, and congratulations on the stats. I know you're quite proud of them.
Thanks.
All right. Let's go to health and welfare. We're going to go to page number 263. Before we do that, though, let's go to the revenue side, if I might. And Mrs. Gardner, can you help me here?
46.
It is 46. And is it also the top of 47 or no? No, that's already. Yep. Yep. So let's go to the health department revenue. And in essence, this is all done on the 3-year average. Is that correct? Except with the One Health grant for non-public schools. That's coming down substantially. Hey, Mr. Cleary.
Good evening.
Good evening. Can you tell us what's going on with the grant that's coming down?
Our understanding is there's a change at the state and how they calculate the formula, and that is resulting in a reduction for us.
Never goes the other way, does it? That's as much detail as we have on it, and that agrees to what we hear the state is going to give us? Is that what we're hearing?
I'm not sure I quite understand the question.
Okay. Has this number been verified with the state, or was this a calculation?
I think I think it's based upon the reduction that we experienced this year. It's based upon that number. I think it's just that we're projecting that we'll probably see about the same amount because the formula was changed last year. We received that amount this year. The estimate is based upon what we experienced this year.
I don't understand. This year we have in the budget 54,000. Are we not getting that?
I guess I'm not certain on that one.
Can we get Mr. Mayor, can we get a follow-up on that item to just understand that $40,000 number a little bit better? Thank you. Any other questions on revenue for the department? Seeing none, let's go to the expense side of the equation, which is page 220. Oh, I'm sorry, I've got that wrong. It's 263. 263 is the verbiage. 264, 265, and 266 are the numbers. We are essentially flat at a 0.46% increase year over year. Do we have any questions, comments, concerns on this budget? Mr. Walsh?
Can you just review your staffing change? You added an assistant director, but then you took away a sanitarian?
That's correct, yes. So we essentially, the sanitarian A, who's been with us for 17 years, we basically requested that he be made assistant director. He was basically flatlined at his current salary, and so, but he's basically made an assistant director to allow for a better administration of the department.
Does that individual still go and do inspections for restaurants and things like that?
He still maintains his responsibility as a sanitarian, so he's a part of the team in doing the environmental inspections, but we've added an administrative aspect to his job.
All right. No, just with all the restaurants, I just want to make sure we're still getting the same service we'd had before.
That's
and all
correct.
that stuff. Thanks.
Any other questions? Going once, going twice? All right. Let's go on to Human and Social Services, page 268.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clary. I appreciate it very much. Have a good evening. Good evening, ladies.
Good evening.
How are you guys?
Good, thanks.
Good. All right, so we're going to turn it directly over to you to start. Go right ahead, and we'll go questions after that.
Okay. First, I want to thank you, of course, for your past support. The budget for this fiscal year 17 totals $647,756. The breakdown by area of service includes the following: the Bigelow Center for Senior Activities at $207,689. Social Services, $202,244. Senior Transportation at $237,823. The staffing remains the same. Well, no, the staffing is 2 full-time staff, myself, and an administrative assistant. There are 18 part-time staff, including Julie DeMarco here as my senior center manager, a program coordinator, 4 social services, bus dispatchers, and drivers and clerks, and a coffee server. I provide supervision for all of the staff, including 2 part-time custodians from Department of Public Works. I briefly wanted to just highlight a few things that you allowed us to do with the finances last year. We did change our name to the Bigelow Center for Senior Activities. Very proud of that. That was really an honorarium to Cindy Bigelow for her past 27 years of personal and financial support to the senior center. We had a private individual who donated her professional services, estimated at $5,000, to design a new name and logo for the Bigelow Center for Senior Activities. Our membership has grown 36% in the past year to a total of 2,674. The Senior Center membership grows by about 14 new members per week. This is a significant factor in our overall department management, so I wanted to emphasize that. It really is busy. The process of national accreditation for the senior centers was initiated this year with the Commission and community stakeholder meetings. The purpose of accreditation is really to improve the quality of service and value delivered by the senior center to the community. It also helps with the grants and funding, so we certainly want to hopefully accomplish this by the end of 2016, although we have 3 years to do it. A new lunch program, including a new catering and restaurant-style service, was piloted in June with successful implementation this fall. An average of 55 seniors are served lunch daily. This is an increase of 20% over last year. Our expanded exercise program increased the number of classes by 30%. Over 30 health and wellness programs were offered this past fall. Variety of weekly day trips were introduced with more than 30 trips offered. The hours of operation continue to be extended to Thursday evenings and Saturday mornings for 8 months of the year. March through June, and September through December. The other 4 months we found were very low attendance or lower attendance, so we did not have the extended hours at that time. A conservative number is estimated at over 3,400 hours of volunteer service with a pay equivalent of $61,000 for last year's volunteer support. This is largely due to the efforts of our volunteer coordinator, and she really does a remarkable job to make the place sing. This year, a newly formed Friends of the Bigelow Center for Senior Activities was created with talented volunteers dedicated to fundraising for the purpose of enhancing the senior center. Plans are underway for fundraisers next fall. A grant was received from the Fairfield Rotary Foundation for $1,000 to assist with the purchase of a projector for the dining hall multimedia renovation. 2 promotional senior center videos were done at no charge. They were filmed by student volunteers and a professional actor. Professional film editing was donated as a gift in kind by Bigelow Tea. We continue to do fundraising activities with model train shows and rental income from the workplace, where we provided space for training long-term unemployed. Due to the extended hours and increased programming and increased membership, the department's budget for fiscal year 2017 is requesting a part-time receptionist for minimum wage of $10.10, totaling $10,241 for 1,014 hours. This person is the public's first contact when they walk in the front door. The continuity of a staff person familiar with the ongoing department programs and services will ensure accuracy of information, confidentiality, and support for the senior center's extended hours. In social services, we provided information and referral, crisis and short-term counseling, case management for seniors, people with disabilities, and families. Staff contacts made with clients, families, and community partners totaled over 3,000, including 943 office visits and 120 home visits. There were 148 new adult clients served in 2015. A new program called Fairfield Jumpstart offered a financial literacy speaker program for social service clients. In 2015, the police and fire departments made over 39 referrals to social services. There were 732 referrals made by the staff to community resources. The United Way grant gave us $5,000 for housing assistance to families in need, and we are hoping to apply for that again and help with our families. A new program called Operation Fuel, that's the $1 in your electric bill that you say to donate, was initiated for the first time with $5,000 to help low-income homeowners and renters with energy assistance. Salvation Army fundraising during the December holidays gave an additional $3,000 in funding to help residents in need. Holiday community donations collected over $16,000 in December to help local families in need with emergency assistance for several months. Connecticut and federal energy assistance applications were provided to over 200 local households and totaled more than $70,000 in benefits to the vendors for heating assistance. Sacred Heart University social work program contacted us this past fall, and we now have 2 social work interns currently working in our department. They are revamping the community resources online and helping to develop a new health program with the health department regarding family and addiction issues. They also participate and support the daily social services operations. Our first mental health breakfast was held for community social service agencies and school guidance and social work personnel. This was done to promote better use of resources to serve the community. Ongoing education in the areas of veterans, supervision, state benefit programs were completed for professional development. Veteran service needs were specifically addressed and expanded this year with staff continuing education courses and seminars in collaboration with the Senior Center Monthly Veterans Program featuring a Veterans Resource Specialist to have individual appointments. Vanessa Marshall, who previously headed the Fairfield Veterans Advisory and Information Services, a not-for-profit, retired this year. This service will be folded into the Human and Social Services, as the professional staff already perform many of these services to our veterans and their families. A new account within the Human and Social Services budget will be designated for the Veterans Services. I am asking the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance to transfer the fiscal year 2017 budget request of $3,420 to the Human Services account. This will result in one fewer not-for-profit with no loss of services for the veterans, but rather an enhanced offering of programs and services that will be available to veterans and their families in social services and the senior center. And finally, last but not least, the senior transportation services. In 2015, more than 14,000 rides were provided to seniors, over 200 seniors unduplicated in the course of the year. 3 buses are on the town roads daily, providing curb-to-curb service to the senior center, medical appointments, grocery shopping, library, barber, beauty parlor, social services, and special events, museums, special lunches, and clubs. The buses cover 31 square miles of town, picking up and dropping off the more than 200 seniors who require and depend on this transportation. The senior transit service is unique, with wheelchair accessibility and driver professionalism. The drivers detect personal changes and identify problems before they occur, and they work closely with senior center and social services staff. Drivers handle emergencies safely, help with packages, offer friendly and warm-hearted greetings, and instill confidence with their courtesy and expertise. This year we have a 5-year senior bus replacement schedule that recommends that the 2005 Ford bus with 96,000 mileage in fair condition be moved into reserved for use when other buses are in for repair, inspection, and maintenance. This year's budget includes the capital outlay of $60,000 to purchase a replacement bus. In April, a grant will be submitted to the Department of Transportation to cover the partial cost of $30,000, as long as it is wheelchair accessible. As always, thank you for your attention and all your support.
Thank you very much. Questions from board members on this budget? Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you very much. Sounds like you had a busy year and a productive year. I'd like to talk about the Fairfield Veterans Advisory. It is a separate line item in the budget this year, and just so I'm clear, it is not reflected in your budget. You would like us to move it there.
Yes.
That's correct?
Yes.
Will you have a dedicated person?
I am the point person that has been identified primarily because I'm there serving between Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. But I will delegate it out to the senior leadership of my social service staff who have already been educated in this area. So, yes.
That's a wonderful idea. This is one of the not-for-profits that's very close to my heart, frankly, and I just want to make sure that that doesn't get lost in the overall human services budget. I don't know if it becomes a separate line item or how it's kept funded properly, but I'd like to see it maybe somehow designated as a separate effort. But I will make the motion during the budget if it's not already done by the Board of Selectmen to move it to your budget.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Other questions, comments on this budget? Mr. Walsh?
The replacement bus that you're discussing, you mentioned you're applying for a $30,000 grant. Is the bus going to cost $90,000 or is it going to cost $60,000?
$60,000.
And then
So we're hoping to defray the cost by $30,000.
All right, and what will happen with those funds if you get them? Will you turn them back over to the town, the extra 30?
Yes.
You will?
Yes, I would think that's the right thing to do.
Okay.
The issue is that we're not sure we get the grant.
I understand. I just want to make sure, I just want to get a commitment from the department head that if for some reason they do get the grant, that it's just not going to be spent in other areas without us knowing about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, ladies. Appreciate you being here tonight. And any other questions, comments, concerns, or not questions, but comments or concerns from the public on any of the budgets heard this evening? Seeing none, we thank you. That wraps up our schedule for tonight, and we'll be back at this tomorrow night. Remember, Thursday is St. Patrick's Day, so we are here tomorrow night, and I believe we are back at the Board of Education building at 7:30. Do I have a motion? Mr. DeWitt, do I have a second? Mr. Mottola, all in favor of adjournment? Opposed? Abstentions? We're done, everybody. Good night.